My name is Aisha. I am a taxi driver. Yes, you heard it right. A woman taxi driver. I have 3 beautiful daughters, and they are my whole world. Before I start my story, I want to ask you something. Please listen to it completely. Every part of it holds a piece of my heart, and I am sure it will touch yours too. Now let me take you on a little journey. It was a bright morning when I woke up to the soft breathing of my youngest daughter, Amira. She is only 4 years old. Her tiny hand was resting on my cheek. Her face was so peaceful, so innocent. I kissed her forehead and slowly got out of bed. My 2 older daughters, Sarah and Layla, were still sleeping. Sarah is 10, and Layla is 12. I gently pulled their blankets up to keep them warm. I walked to the small window of our apartment and looked outside. The sun was slowly rising, painting the sky with soft orange and pink colors. It was beautiful, but my heart felt heavy. I had bills to pay, school fees to cover, and food to put on the table. My girls were still too young to understand how hard I was working for them. And honestly, I didn't want them to know. I just wanted them to smile and be happy. After a quick breakfast of bread and tea, I wore my simple black scarf and got ready for work. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were a little tired, but I smiled, because no matter how tired I was, I knew I was doing it all for my daughters. As I walked to my taxi, I felt a familiar weight on my chest. Being a female taxi driver was not easy. People stared at me. Some passengers gave me strange looks. Some even refused to get into my car when they saw I was a woman. But I had learned to ignore the looks. I had learned to smile even when my heart was breaking. That morning, my first passenger was a young man. He seemed nervous. He got into the back seat and gave me an address. As I drove, I noticed him constantly checking his phone. His hands were shaking. I glanced at him through the mirror and softly asked, "Are you okay?" He looked up, surprised by my question. His eyes filled with tears. He tried to look away, but I saw the pain in his face. After a few moments of silence, he whispered, "I'm on my way to say goodbye to my mother. She's dying." I felt a lump in my throat. I wanted to say something, but words felt small in that moment, so I just nodded gently. I drove as fast as I could without breaking any rules. When we reached the hospital, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly, handing me the money, but I shook my head. "No, go see your mother. That's more important." He stared at me, unable to speak. His hands trembled as he placed the money back in his pocket. Then, without saying a word, he ran towards the hospital doors. I sat there for a few seconds, staring at the hospital. I thought of my own mother. She passed away years ago. I didn't get to say goodbye. A tear slipped down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. I took a deep breath and started my engine again. Later that day, I picked up an old woman. She was carrying a small bag of groceries. Her hands were shaking slightly as she got into the car. Her voice was soft and kind. Can you take me home, dear? My legs are not so strong anymore, she said with a gentle smile. As we drove, she talked about her late husband. Her voice was filled with warmth and sadness. She told me they were married for 50 years. 50 years of love, laughter, and memories. Now it's just me and my flowers, she said, forcing a smile. When we reached her house, she struggled to get out of the car. I quickly got out and helped her with her bag. She held my hand tightly. Her eyes were soft but tired. Thank you, my dear. You are very kind, she whispered. I squeezed her hand gently and smiled. As I walked back to my car, I felt my heart swell. The warmth of her gratitude stayed with me for the rest of the day. But not every day was filled with kindness. Some days were hard, very hard. Once, a man got into my taxi. He was drunk. He reeked of alcohol. He slurred his words and made rude comments. My hands were shaking slightly as I gripped the steering wheel, but I kept calm. I didn't say anything. I just focused on driving. When I reached his destination, he threw the money on the seat and stumbled out of the car. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Sometimes the world could be cruel, but I promised myself I would never let it harden my heart. At night, when I returned home, my daughters ran to the door to greet me. Their arms around my neck were the only thing I needed to wash away the day's pain. Mama, you're home, little Amira said, her voice filled with joy. I hugged them tightly, feeling their tiny arms wrapped around me. Their warmth melted away my tiredness. I held them a little longer than usual. After dinner, we sat on the floor and played together. We laughed. We sang songs. We made silly faces. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the bills, not the stares, not the exhaustion. Only their laughter, only their happiness. When I tucked them into bed, Sarah asked softly, Mama, why do you work so much? I looked into her innocent eyes and smiled gently. Because I want you to have everything you dream of, my love. She reached out and held my face with her tiny hands. But we just want you, Mama. You are everything. Her words pierced through my heart. I kissed her forehead and whispered, I love you so much. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I was tired, but my heart was full. I want you to remember something. Life is not always easy. It will test you. It will break you. But don't let it change your heart. Be kind, even when the world is not. Help others, even when no one is watching. Because the smallest act of kindness can heal someone's soul. And if you are ever tired, if you ever feel like giving up, remember the ones who love you. Remember why you started. Let their love give you strength. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please like and subscribe. It means a lot to me. It motivates me to share more stories that can make you feel, think, and love a little more. Because the world needs more kindness. and we can be the ones to give it. As the seasons changed, so did I. The grief I once carried like a heavy stone began to soften into something gentler. It didn't disappear, but it became lighter, like a feather resting quietly in my chest, reminding me of Grandma's love rather than her absence. The first time I visited her grave alone, I was afraid. The cemetery was quiet, except for the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional bird singing from a nearby tree. I clutched the locket in my hand, feeling its familiar warmth against my skin. Her gravestone was simple and elegant, just as she would have liked. The words etched into the smooth, grey stone read, Margaret Evelyn Carter, loving wife, mother and grandmother, forever in our hearts. I knelt down and placed a small bouquet of jasmine on the ground. My hands trembled slightly as I traced the letters of her name with my fingertips. Hi, Grandma, I whispered softly. I brought you your favorite flowers. I closed my eyes and let the gentle wind brush against my face. For a moment, I could almost feel her hand resting on mine, the way she used to when I was small. I miss you, I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. But I'm okay, I promise. You taught me how to be strong, and I'm trying. I really am. The wind stirred slightly, and a few petals from the jasmine bouquet floated into the air, twirling softly before landing on the grass. It felt like she was answering me, like she was telling me she was proud. I stayed there for a while talking to her about my day, my hopes, and my fears, just as I used to when she was alive. And even though she didn't respond with words, I could feel her with me. When I finally stood up to leave, I kissed the locket gently before tucking it beneath my sweater. I turned and walked away slowly, but I knew I wasn't leaving her behind. She was walking with me, just as she always had. The weeks passed, and life slowly began to settle back into its rhythm. I returned to school, spent time with friends, and even began painting again, something I hadn't done since Grandma's passing. She had always loved my paintings, even the messy, imperfect ones. One evening, I sat in my bedroom with my sketchbook on my lap. I stared at the blank page for a long time, unsure of what to draw. My fingers absent-mindedly brushed against the locket, and suddenly, I knew exactly what I wanted to create. I picked up my pencil and began sketching. Slowly, the lines took shape. A familiar face with kind, gentle eyes and a warm smile. I drew Grandma. I added tiny, intricate details. The soft creases around her eyes when she smiled, the curve of her lips, and the gentle waves in her hair. And in the background, I drew a swing. Our swing. When I was finished, I stared at the drawing for a long time. My hands were smudged with pencil dust, but I didn't care. I pressed my fingers against the sketch, tracing the lines of her face. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were soft, quiet tears. The kind that come when you hold something so beautiful in your heart that it overflows. I placed the drawing in a small frame and set it on my nightstand. That night, I fell asleep with the locket against my chest and the sketch of Grandma beside me. In my dreams, she came to me. We were in the backyard again, and she was sitting on the swing, just as she always did. The golden light of the sunset painted the sky, and the scent of jasmine floated through the air. She smiled at me and held out her hand. "Come sit with me, Lily," she said softly. I ran to her, and she pulled me into her arms. Her embrace was warm and familiar, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was home. "I've missed you so much," I whispered, my voice trembling. She cupped my face in her hands and looked into my eyes. "Oh, my sweet Lily," she said with a soft laugh. "I never left." Her words wrapped around me like a blanket, filling every empty space. In my heart, we sat on the swing, gently rocking back and forth. She hummed the melody from the music box, and I closed my eyes, letting the sound carry me. When I woke up the next morning, my pillow was damp with tears. But my heart felt light, as if she had visited me in the night, just to remind me that she was still with me as the days turned into years. I carried Grandma's love with me through every stage of my life. When I graduated, I wore the locket beneath my gown, holding it in my hand as I walked across the stage. When I got my first job, I placed the small framed sketch of her on my desk. And when I eventually fell in love, I told my partner all about her. The way she laughed, the way she danced in the rain, and the way she loved with her whole heart. And one day, when I had children of my own, I sat them down and told them about their great-grandmother. I told them how she used to push me on the swing and sing to me when I was afraid. I showed them the letters from Grandpa and played the melody from the music box. I watched their eyes fill with wonder as I opened the locket and showed them the tiny photograph inside. She was beautiful. My daughter whispered softly. "She still is," I smiled, holding the locket close to my heart. And whenever they asked me where Grandma was, I would point to the flowers in the garden, the stars in the night sky, and the gentle wind that played with their hair. "She's everywhere," I would say. "You just have to notice." And in those quiet, beautiful moments, I knew that Grandma's love would live on, not just in me, but in my children, and in their children, and in every person whose life I touched with the warmth she once gave me, because love, the real, boundless, and unconditional kind, never dies. It flows through us, from one heart to another, like a river that never runs dry. And so, every time I pass by a jasmine bush and catch the soft, sweet scent of its flowers, I smile, because I know it's her way of saying hello. If you've listened this far, thank you for sharing this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and leave a like. Your support allows me to keep creating and sharing more heartfelt and meaningful stories with you. And always remember, love never truly leaves us. It simply finds a new way to stay. The seasons began to change, as they always do. The summer heat softened into the cool embrace of autumn, The leaves turned golden and rusty red, painting the trees with strokes of warmth. The park where Grandma and I used to walk became a canvas of fallen leaves, crackling softly beneath my feet as I wandered along the familiar path. One afternoon, I sat on the same wooden bench by the pond. The air was crisp, and the gentle breeze carried the faint scent of pine and earth. I watched as a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, chased after a cluster of leaves caught in the wind. Her laughter rang through the air, carefree and bright. For a moment, I saw myself in her, the way I used to be, running through this same park with Grandma's hand, holding mine. I smiled softly, remembering how she would always let me stomp through the biggest piles of leaves, even though my boots would get muddy. Suddenly, the little girl tripped and fell. Her laughter turned into a sharp cry, and she sat on the ground, holding her knee. Her mother rushed over, kneeling beside her, brushing the hair from her face. Shh, shh. It's okay, baby, the mother whispered, gently kissing her forehead. I've got you. I felt a lump rise in my throat, watching that mother hold her child so tenderly. I was reminded of the way Grandma used to hold me whenever I fell. She would always wipe away my tears with her soft hands and whisper, "It's all right, my little wildflower. You're strong. You'll be just fine." I blinked away the sudden tears and smiled faintly. The little girl sniffled once, then stood up with wobbly legs. Holding her mother's hand, she gave a small, brave smile, and they walked away together, hand in hand. I sat there for a while, watching the leaves fall gently into the pond. Their reflections rippled softly across the water, and I thought about how love is a lot like that. A ripple that keeps moving, long after the stone has disappeared beneath the surface. As the sun began to sink lower, I decided it was time to head home. I slipped my hands into the pockets of my coat and walked slowly, feeling the cool breeze brush against my cheeks. That evening, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, the same kind Grandma used to make. I curled up by the window with a thick, knitted blanket wrapped around my shoulders. I held the warm mug between my hands and stared out at the darkening sky. A soft drizzle began to fall, painting the window pane with tiny, glistening beads. The surf's rain tapped gently against the glass, and suddenly I remembered one of my favorite memories with Grandma. It was a rainy evening, much like this one. I was 7 years old, and we were sitting by the fireplace, watching the flames dance and flicker. The rain had been falling heavily all day, drumming against the roof like a soft lullaby. "Grandma," I had asked, "do you think the rain is sad?" She chuckled softly and pulled me closer. "No, my love," she had whispered, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "The rain isn't sad. It just misses the earth sometimes. It falls so it can kiss the soil, wake the flowers, and wash the tiredness from the trees." I had nodded, leaning into her warm embrace, comforted by the thought. Now, sitting by the window with the rain falling softly outside, I smiled at the memory. I realized that love was a lot like the rain. It had its own gentle way of returning to us. Even when we thought it was gone. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to visit Grandma's grave. The cemetery was a short walk from my house, tucked away at the edge of a small hill. It was a quiet place, where the wind whispered softly through the tall grass and the birds sang their morning songs. I carried a small bouquet of white daisies, her favorite flowers. When I reached her headstone, I knelt down and carefully placed the daisies beside it. My fingers traced the letters of her name, carved into the smooth stone. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered softly. The breeze picked up slightly, rustling the leaves around me. I closed my eyes, letting the wind brush against my face, imagining it was her gentle touch. "I miss you," I whispered, my voice trembling. "But I'm okay. I'm stronger now, just like you always said I would be." I pulled the silver locket from around my neck and opened it, gazing at the small photograph. "Thank you for loving me the way you did," I said softly. "You made me who I am." I stayed there for a while, listening to the soft rustle of the leaves and the distant bird song. I felt a gentle peace settle in my chest, a warmth that wrapped around my heart, reminding me that Grandma was never truly far away. Before I left, I took a deep breath and whispered, "I'll keep your love with me always." As I walked away from the grave, I felt lighter somehow, as though she was walking beside me, her hand still holding mine, and in the days that followed, I kept my promise. I carried her love with me in everything I did. I smiled more at strangers, the way she always did. I took time to sit in the park, watching the leaves dance in the wind, just like she used to. I even started visiting the old man at the park more often. His name was Walter. We would sit by the pond, feeding the ducks together. He told me stories about his late wife, and I told him about my grandmother. One afternoon, as we sat by the water, he suddenly reached into his pocket and handed me a small folded piece of paper. "What's this?" I asked, unfolding it carefully. "It's a poem I wrote for my wife," he said softly. "I thought you might like it." I slowly read the words, my eyes filling with tears. It was a simple poem, but it was filled with so much tenderness and longing. "I held your hand 1,000 days, and still I hold it in my dreams. You left with half of my heart, but love still flows in quiet streams." I pressed the paper to my chest, my throat tightening. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Walter smiled faintly and patted my hand. "You remind me of her," he said softly. "Kind heart, gentle soul." And in that moment, I realized something beautiful. Love doesn't die. It simply passes from one heart to another. Walter's wife was still with him, just as Grandma was still with me. Their love had become part of us, woven into our souls, guiding us softly, gently, endlessly. As I walked home that evening, the sun began to set, and the sky was painted in soft hues of lavender and gold. I pressed the silver locket to my chest, feeling its warmth against my skin, and I smiled, because I knew without a doubt that somewhere beyond the horizon, Grandma was watching over me, and she was smiling too. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you from the bottom of my heart. If this story touched you, please subscribe and leave a like. It helps me continue sharing meaningful and emotional stories with you. And remember, love is never lost. It simply finds new ways to hold us. As the years passed, I carried Grandma's love with me like a quiet melody in my heart. I grew older, but the locket never left my neck. It became a part of me, a reminder that I was never truly alone. On my 18th birthday, I stood in front of the mirror, holding the locket between my fingers. I traced the tiny silver edges, feeling its warmth against my skin. It was a strange day, a mix of joy and longing. I was officially an adult, yet I wished Grandma were there to see me. I imagined her clapping with joy, her eyes sparkling with pride, and her voice calling me her big girl, the way she used to when I was little. My parents threw me a small birthday party, and my friends came over. There were balloons, laughter, and cake, but a part of me felt distant, lost in thoughts of her. After everyone left, I slipped out of the house and walked to the park, holding the locket close. The evening was quiet, and the golden light paint the sky in soft pastel hues. I found the old wooden bench near the pond, the same one where I had once spoken to the elderly man. It was empty now. I sat down, staring at the water, watching the sun slowly disappear beyond the trees. I carefully opened the locket and stared at the tiny photograph. My fingertips brushed over the image of my grandparents, as if I could somehow touch the love they shared. "Grandma," I whispered into the evening air, "I hope you're proud of me." A gentle breeze swept through the park, making the leaves rustle softly. I closed my eyes and smiled faintly. Somehow I knew she was. As the years continued to unfold, I carried her with me in every chapter of my life. When I graduated, I wore the locket beneath my gown, holding it tightly as I walked across the stage. I could almost hear her voice in my heart saying, "I knew you could do it, my girl." When I started my first job, I kept the locket tucked close, and on the nights when the world felt too heavy, I would sit by the window, play the old music box, and let the haunting melody carry me back to her arms. And then, one day, I fell in love. His name was Daniel. He had kind eyes, the kind that reminded me of my grandfather's gentle gaze. We met on a rainy afternoon at a cafe when he offered me his umbrella. As I stood shivering under the awning, his smile was warm and his voice felt familiar, even though we were strangers. Over time, Daniel became my safe place, the person I could run to when the world felt uncertain. He made me laugh the way Grandma once had. He listened with the same softness in his eyes. One evening, as we sat on a picnic blanket, watching the sunset, he gently reached for my hand. "Lily," he whispered, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." I turned to him, my heart fluttering. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a delicate ring with a tiny glimmering diamond. "Will you marry me?" he asked softly, his voice trembling with hope. Tears stung my eyes. I smiled and nodded, unable to find my voice. "Yes," I finally whispered. He slipped the ring onto my finger, and I held his hand tightly. At that moment, I felt a warmth in my chest, a familiar warmth. I reached for the locket around my neck, clutching it gently. "Do you see this, Grandma?" I thought to myself. "I found someone who makes my heart feel safe, just like you always did." As I stood beneath the stars with Daniel, I felt the evening breeze swirl around us. I closed my eyes and imagined that somewhere my grandmother was smiling, holding Grandpa's hand and whispering, "She's gonna be just fine." On my wedding day, I carried the locket with me. I fastened it to my bouquet, a tiny silver heart resting among the soft white roses. When I walked down the aisle, I held it close. With each step, I felt my grandmother's presence, her love, woven into the very fabric of that moment. After the wedding, Daniel and I built a life together. We bought a small house with a garden, one that I filled with jasmine, just like Grandma's. The first time the flowers bloomed, their sweet scent filled the air, and I stood in the middle of the garden with my eyes closed, breathing it all in. I could feel her there. I always could. And then one day I became a mother. The first time I held my daughter in my arms, I pressed my lips softly against her forehead and closed my eyes. She had tiny fingers, delicate and perfect. Her eyes were wide and curious, just like mine had been. I named her Margaret, after my grandmother. As she grew older, I would tell her stories about her great-grandmother. I would sit by her bed at night, holding the locket in my hands, and say, "This belonged to someone very special. She was kind and gentle and full of love, and now she's part of you too." My daughter would stare at the locket with wide eyes, as though she could feel the love woven into the tiny silver heart. And as the years passed, I watched my daughter grow with the same gentle spirit that Grandma had. She had the same soft smile and the same light in her eyes. Sometimes I would catch her sitting by the jasmine flowers, watching them sway in the breeze, and I would smile, knowing she was already carrying a part of Grandma with her. One day, when Margaret turned 12, I sat her down in the garden, beneath the evening sun. With trembling hands, I unclasped the locket from around my neck and placed it into her small hands. Her eyes widened. "Mommy, is this for me?" she asked softly. I nodded, my voice thick with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered. "It's yours now." She carefully opened it and stared at the tiny photograph inside. "Who are they?" she asked. I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. "Your great-grandparents," I whispered. They loved each other very much, and they loved me. And now they'll always be with you too. She clutched the locket tightly, as if she knew it was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a piece of our family's love, carried through time. That night, I watched from the doorway as she sat by the window, holding the locket in her hands. She stared out at the garden, watching the jasmine sway softly in the wind. I knew at that moment that the love my grandmother had given me, the same love she had once shared with my grandfather, would continue on. It would live in Margaret's heart. It would live in her memories. It would bloom in her laughter and shine in her kindness. Because love, the real enduring kind, never truly leaves. It simply carries on, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, generation to generation, and someday Margaret would share the locket with her child, just as I had shared it with her, and the secret I had once kept, the one that began with a letter, a music box, and a silver locket, would continue to live on, carried by the hands and hearts of those who came after me. So, if you've made it this far, thank you for walking with me through this journey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and leave a like. It means the world to me and helps me share more beautiful and meaningful stories with you. And remember, love never truly leaves. It simply changes form. It becomes the wind that brushes your cheek, the flower that blooms by your window, and the memories that linger in your heart forever. As time went on, I found myself holding on to Grandma's lessons more tightly. It wasn't just the locket or the music box. It was the quiet wisdom she had left behind, the subtle imprints of her love that lingered in my life. One evening, about a year after she passed, I was walking home from school. The sky was painted with soft shades of lavender and peach, and the evening breeze carried the scent of freshly baked bread from the corner bakery. The world felt calm, almost still, but my heart was heavy. It had been a difficult day. I had failed my math test, and my friends seemed distant, caught up in their own teenage struggles. I felt small, invisible, and tired. As I walked, I absent-mindedly clutched the silver locket, feeling its familiar weight against my chest. I wanted to talk to Grandma. I wanted to hear her voice, to feel her arms around me. Without thinking, I took a detour and headed to the park, the one we used to visit together. The sun was slowly dipping below the horizon, and the golden light shimmered on the surface of the pond. I sat on the same wooden bench where I had once spoken with the old man. I hadn't seen him again since that day, but his words had stayed with me. I sat there in the stillness, watching the sun disappear. The ducks floated lazily on the water, and a few children chased each other near the swings. Their laughter echoed softly through the evening air. I hugged my knees to my chest, trying to fight the lump in my throat. And then, it happened. A woman walked by with her daughter, a little girl with golden curls. The girl wore a white dress with tiny blue roses, just like the pattern on Grandma's apron. She ran ahead, giggling as she tried to catch a butterfly fluttering nearby. For a brief moment, I felt the world slow down. The little girl's laughter sounded just like mine when I was younger, and the way her mother called after her, it was soft and gentle, just like Grandma's voice. I closed my eyes and let the warm breeze brush against my face. For the first time in a while, I didn't feel sad. I felt her. I could almost hear Grandma's voice in my mind. It's okay to feel lost sometimes, Lily. It just means you're finding your way back to yourself. I took a deep breath and let the weight in my chest loosen. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was still quiet, and the sun was barely peeking over the horizon. I put on my jacket, slipped the locket around my neck, and quietly stepped outside. The morning air was crisp and cool, and the sky was painted with soft pastel hues. Without knowing why, I walked to the small hill just outside of town. The one Grandma used to take me to when she wanted to watch the sunrise. I hadn't been there in years. As I climbed the gentle slope, my heart pounded slightly from the effort, but I didn't stop. When I reached the top, the entire town stretched out below me. The rooftops shimmered with the soft morning light, and the fields in the distance were painted gold. I sat down on the damp grass, hugging my knees, and watched as the sun slowly bathed the world in warmth. I closed my eyes and felt the sunlight on my face. It felt like her touch, soft, warm, and familiar. And in that moment, I realized something. Grandma had never really left me. She was in the sunlight that warmed my skin. She was in the gentle breeze that made the leaves dance. She was in the laughter of strangers and the wildflowers that bloomed by the roadside. She was everywhere. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't heavy with sorrow. They were light with love. I smiled through them and clutched the locket against my chest. Thank you for staying with me, Grandma. I whispered softly into the morning air. As I sat there, a butterfly suddenly fluttered by. It was small, with delicate wings painted in shades of soft lavender and pale gold, the same colors as the sunrise. It danced around me for a few moments, as if it were playing, before gracefully flying away. I watched it disappear into the morning sky, and I knew somehow that it was a sign. A few days later, I found myself standing in Grandma's old room, holding the music box in my hands. I slowly wound it and let the familiar melody fill the room. The hauntingly beautiful tune brought tears to my eyes, but this time, they were not tears of sadness. They were filled with gratitude. I slowly opened one of Grandma's old journals, the one I had never been able to bring myself to read. Her delicate handwriting filled the pages, soft and elegant, just like her. On one page, I found a small pressed flower, one of the wildflowers she used to pick on our walks. Beneath it, she had written, "There is beauty in everything, my Lily. If you look with love." Her words sank deep into my heart, filling the cracks that grief had left behind. And from that day on, I did my best to live by her words. Whenever life felt heavy, I would search for the beauty she had taught me to see. I would watch the sunset with quiet wonder, marveling at how the colors blended so perfectly. I would let the rain wash over my face. And remember how Grandma used to say that rain wasn't sad. It was just the sky giving the earth a drink. I would stop and smell the flowers she loved, even when I was in a rush. I would close my eyes and listen to the wind, knowing that if I listened closely enough, I could still hear her laughter. And sometimes, when the world grew still and quiet, I would sit by the pond and watch the ducks glide across the water. I would hum the soft melody of the music box and let the memory of her love hold me close. Because I knew that love, true, selfless, and enduring love, doesn't end. It simply changes form. It becomes the wind that brushes against your face. It becomes the star that twinkles brighter than the others. It becomes the song that makes your heart ache and heal all at once. And if you hold on tightly enough, it becomes part of you, woven into your soul, your laughter, and your very breath. So, if you've made it this far, thank you for sharing this story with me. If it has touched your heart, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It encourages me to keep sharing more stories filled with love, hope, and warmth. And remember this: the people we love never truly leave us. They become part of the world around us, part of the beauty we see, and part of the love we carry. So, if you ever feel alone, just close your eyes. Breathe deeply, listen closely, and you'll hear them in the wind, in the rain, and in the soft melody of your heart always.